Welcome to Void of Rules. I was just looking at my channel analytics, and a shocking 85.5% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. If you're enjoying these stories, consider hitting that subscribe button to help me reach 1K subscribers by the end of the year. It costs absolutely nothing, takes just 1 second, and you can always change your mind later. Drop a like on the video too. It really helps with the algorithm. Now let's jump into today's story. The first thing you should know about the McDonald's I work at is that it's not like the others. Sure, it has the golden arches out front, the familiar red and yellow colour scheme, and that distinct fast food smell that clings to your clothes long after your shift ends. But there's something off about it. I moved to Millfield, Ohio about 2 months ago. It's one of those tiny towns that exists as little more than a pit stop for travellers on the long stretch of highway cutting through endless cornfields. I didn't have much choice in the matter. Grandpa Frank's health took a nosedive, and with no other family stepping up, it fell to me to move into his creaky farmhouse and make sure he took his medications. Jobs aren't exactly plentiful in Millfield. The only businesses that seem to thrive are the gas station, the dollar store, and this McDonald's, perched on the edge of town where the highway bends sharply around a cluster of ancient oak trees. I remember my interview with Tom, the general manager. He seemed normal enough, mid-40s, slightly receding hairline, a practiced customer service smile that never quite reached his eyes. The interview was standard until the very end. "Just one more thing," Tom said, sliding a stapled packet across his desk. The McDonald's logo was printed at the top, but beneath it, in bold red letters, were the words, "Special Location Procedures." "These are location-specific guidelines," he explained, his voice dropping to a near whisper despite us being alone in his office. "They might seem unusual, but they're absolutely mandatory. Breaking any of these rules is grounds for immediate termination." I nodded, not thinking much of it. Every retail job has its quirks. Maybe this was about highway safety protocols or some corporate experiment with customer service. It wasn't until I got home and flipped through the packet that I realized how strange these procedures really were. Rule 1. Never serve customers who arrive exactly at midnight. Inform them the registers are being reset and offer them a complimentary coffee if they return in 15 minutes. Rule 2. If the ice cream machine actually works after 10 PM, do not use it. Report this anomaly to the manager immediately. Rule 3. The security camera in the back corner of the dining area appears non-functional. Do not attempt to fix it, clean it, or look directly at it for more than 3 seconds. Rule 4. If a customer orders from the special menu, politely direct them to the manager's office without question. Rule 5. The drive-thru speaker must be turned off between 2:37 AM and 2:42 AM nightly. No exceptions. I laughed, thinking it was some elaborate prank they played on new hires. But the next day, when I mentioned it to Jake, one of the other cashiers, the colour drained from his face. "They're not jokes," he said, glancing nervously at the clock as if checking how long until 2:37 AM, despite it being the middle of the afternoon. "Follow them. All of them." Jake had worked there for 3 years, longer than anyone except Tom. He was rail-thin with perpetual dark circles under his eyes. He jumped at small noises and spent his breaks chain-smoking behind the dumpsters. "What happens if you don't follow them?" I asked, half smiling, still thinking this might be an extension of the prank. He just shook his head and walked away, muttering something about needing to check the ketchup dispensers. My first week passed without incident. I worked mostly afternoon shifts, learning the register, dealing with the lunchtime rush of truckers and travellers. I met Michelle, a community college student who always wore bright butterfly hair clips that contrasted with her perpetually worried expression, and Darren, the night manager, who never seemed to eat and whose skin had the waxy pallor of someone who hadn't seen the sun in years. The restaurant itself was slightly different from other McDonald's locations I'd seen. The layout was almost right, but certain proportions seemed off in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint. The distance from the counter to the bathrooms felt longer than it should be. The ceiling in the kitchen area seemed higher than in the dining room, and the play place, visible through a large window, somehow looked smaller from inside the restaurant than it did from the parking lot. I asked Michelle about it during our first break together. She was halfway through an associate's degree in architectural design, so I figured she might notice what I was talking about. "You feel it too?" she asked, voice hushed despite us being alone in the break room. I thought I was going crazy. I actually measured it once. The dining area is 12 feet wider on the outside than it is on the inside. "That's not possible," I said. She just gave me a look. Lots of things aren't possible here. Then she changed the subject. It wasn't until my first late shift that I witnessed anything unusual. I was wiping down the front counter when the digital clock on the register clicked over to 12 a.m. The bell over the front door chimed. A man walked in. There was nothing overtly strange about him. Average height, brown coat, ordinary face. Yet something about the precision of his movements made my skin crawl. It was as if he'd practiced walking like a human but hadn't quite mastered it. Jake, who had been restocking napkins, was suddenly at the register. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "Our registers are resetting for the daily system update. Company policy. If you'd like to return in 15 minutes, I'd be happy to offer you a complimentary coffee for the inconvenience." The man stood perfectly still. He didn't blink. After 13 incredibly uncomfortable seconds, he turned and walked out without a word. As the door closed behind him, Jake exhaled shakily. "That was close," he whispered. "What would have happened if we served him?" I asked. Jake started to answer, then stopped himself, eyes darting to the supposedly non-functional camera in the corner. "Just follow the rules," he said. After that night, I started paying more attention to the customers. Most were normal tired travelers, stopping for a bathroom break and coffee. Local high school kids grabbing an after-school snack. The occasional family on a road trip. But there were others who didn't quite fit. A woman who came in every Monday at 3:17 p.m, ordered a Happy Meal and arranged the food in a perfect circle on her tray without eating any of it. A pair of identical twins, maybe 7 years old, who would press their faces against the play place window from the outside but never came inside. An elderly man who sat in his car in the parking lot for hours, staring at the restaurant without ever entering. The next strange incident happened a few days later. The ice cream machine, notorious for being perpetually broken, suddenly started working at 11:30 p.m. Michelle discovered this when a customer ordered a McFlurry. Her hand was actually on the machine lever when Darren practically vaulted over the counter to stop her. "It's broken," he said, both to Michelle and the confused customer. Then, quietly to Michelle, "Rule 2, report it." Michelle's eyes widened. She scurried to the back while Darren offered the customer a free apple pie instead. I watched from the drive-thru window as Tom emerged from his office minutes later, looking grim. He approached the ice cream machine, pressed some combination of buttons I couldn't see, then opened a panel I never knew existed, and did something inside it. The machine gave an unhealthy grinding noise, then went silent. Tom nodded, satisfied, and returned to his office without explanation. When I asked Michelle about it later, she refused to make eye contact. "The ice cream machine isn't supposed to work at night," was all she would say. "Why not? Wouldn't it be good for business if it actually worked?" She finally looked at me, her expression deadly serious. "It's not broken. It's contained." Before I could ask what that meant, she hurried away to help a customer. The next week, I was assigned more overnight shifts. The restaurant changed after dark. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a different frequency. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, almost solid, and the air felt heavier, as if it was filled with something invisible but nonetheless present. On my first overnight shift, I almost broke Rule 5. It was 2:36 a.m. and I was halfway through an 8-hour shift that had been mercifully quiet. I was wiping down the drive-thru area when I noticed the clock. "Isn't the speaker supposed to be off now?" I asked Darren, who was counting the bills in the register. His head snapped up, eyes widening in alarm. He lunged for the control panel and flipped the switch just as the digital clock changed to 2:37 a.m. "That was close," he breathed, shoulders sagging in relief. "Always watch the clock during overnight shifts. Always." "What happens if—" I began, but Darren cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Just don't," he said. For the next 5 minutes we worked in silence. I tried to ignore the drive-thru speaker, but something drew my attention to it. Although the power was off, the speaker emitted a subtle vibration. It was almost like it was working in reverse. Instead of broadcasting sound outward, it was receiving something. At exactly 2:42 a.m, Darren flipped the switch back on. Neither of us mentioned what had happened. The next morning, before heading home, I discovered strange patterns drawn in ketchup in the third bathroom stall. They resembled no language I recognized. Fluid, circular symbols that seemed to shift slightly if you looked at them from the corner of your eye. I reported it to Tom, who dismissed me immediately and locked the bathroom door behind him. When I returned from my evening shift, the bathroom looked normal. No trace of the strange symbols remained, but something felt different about that stall. The air inside it was noticeably cooler than the rest of the bathroom, and if I stood very still, I could hear a faint whispering coming from the drain. That night, I had my first encounter with what the staff called special menu customers. It was around 9 p.m, and I was working the front register when a perfectly ordinary-looking woman in a business suit approached. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you?" I recited. She smiled pleasantly. "I'd like to order from the special menu, please." My stomach dropped. I remembered Rule 4. If a customer orders from the special menu, politely direct them to the manager's office without question. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please follow me." I led her to Tom's office, knocked twice and stepped back. Tom opened the door, nodded at me dismissively, and ushered the woman inside. The door closed with a soft click. 20 minutes later, the woman emerged alone. She looked the same, but something about her movement had changed. She walked more fluidly, almost gliding across the floor. As she passed me, she turned and smiled. Her teeth seemed too numerous, too sharp. "Thank you for your service," she said, her voice carrying strange harmonics. "This location is functioning properly." She left without ordering any food. When Tom came out of his office an hour later, he looked exhausted, his skin waxy and pale. He caught me watching him and forced a smile. "Corporate quality control," he explained. "Nothing to worry about." 2 days later, I found an addition to my rule packet slid into my locker. Rule 6, if a customer's reflection in the ordering screen doesn't match their appearance, press the hidden button under Register 3 and direct them to the Play Place area. Rule 7, never accept payment in coins that appear to be minted before 1965. Politely refuse and request alternative payment. Rule 8, if the playground equipment moves on its own, lock the playground area and inform customers it's under maintenance. Do not acknowledge the movement regardless of how obvious it may be. With each new rule, my unease grew, but so did my curiosity. I started paying closer attention to the regular patterns of the restaurant, the precise arrangement of tables that never changed, despite being moved during cleaning, the specific sequence we followed when closing down equipment at night, the way certain floor tiles always seemed to be slightly warmer than others, and I began noticing more of the unusual customers. There was one man who came in every Thursday at 8:17 p.m. exactly. He always ordered a quarter pounder with no pickles, large fries, and a Sprite with no ice. He always sat at the same table near the back, facing the wall. He never touched his food. The first time I saw him, I thought little of it. People have their routines, but I noticed none of my coworkers would serve him. They always found reasons to be elsewhere when he approached the counter. leaving me to take his order. After his third visit, I asked Michelle about him. "We call him Thursday Man," she whispered as we restocked the cup lids. "He's been coming here since before any of us worked here. Even Tom won't talk about him." "So, what's his deal? Why is everyone scared of him?" Michelle glanced around to make sure we were alone. "Kyle, he worked here before you. He thought Thursday Man was weird too. Started keeping track of him. Noticed his clothes were always exactly the same, never wrinkled, never dirty. And his food, he never eats it," I finished. "Exactly. So one night Kyle followed him out to the parking lot, wanted to see where he went." Michelle's voice dropped even lower. "Kyle didn't show up for his shift the next day, or ever again. Police found his car in the lot, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition." I tried to dismiss it as a scary story told to newbies, but the next Thursday, I paid closer attention to the man. His movements were too fluid, almost like he was floating slightly above the ground. And when he turned to leave, just for a moment, I thought I saw the back of his head, open. I blinked and he was normal again, walking out the door. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. The following week brought a new disturbing incident. I was cleaning the play place windows when I noticed the plastic balls in the ball pit moving. At first, I thought it was just the air circulation system, but then they started forming patterns, concentric circles that shifted and realigned with deliberate precision. I remembered Rule 8 and hurried to lock the play place doors, placing a closed for maintenance sign without acknowledging what I'd seen. As I turned the key in the lock, I caught sight of a child standing inside, watching me. A child I hadn't seen enter. Its proportions were wrong, arms too long, head slightly too large. It smiled at me with a mouth that stretched wider than humanly possible. I stumbled backward, heart racing. When I looked again, the play place was empty, but the balls continued moving in their hypnotic pattern. I reported it to Darren, who nodded grimly. "You did the right thing. Don't go back in there until morning. It resets at sunrise." "What resets? What is happening in there?" He shook his head. "Just follow the rules." That became the refrain of my employment. Just follow the rules. Don't ask questions. Don't look too closely. But I couldn't help looking. Couldn't stop the questions from forming. About a month into the job, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. I was searching for extra napkins in the storage room when I knocked over a stack of cleaning supplies. As I gathered them up, I noticed the baseboard behind them didn't quite match the wall. Curious, I pressed against it and felt it give slightly. A hidden door. Small, maybe 3 feet high, like something from a children's story. It wasn't locked. Beyond it lay a narrow passage that seemed to descend slightly. Against all better judgment, I followed it. The passage opened into a small room that must have been directly beneath Tom's office. The walls were covered with papers, maintenance logs, employee records, incident reports. They dated back decades, long before this McDonald's could possibly have existed. The oldest was from 1954. February 17th, 1954. First manifestation following construction, 2 workers affected, containment protocols established. The rest was similarly cryptic. References to incidents, when rules were broken. Names of employees who had departed following protocol breaches. Detailed tracking of the strange occurrences I'd begun to notice. The ice cream machine functioning at night, the playground equipment moving, customers whose reflections didn't match. One document caught my eye. A faded blueprint of the restaurant. But it wasn't quite right. The proportions were off, with corridors that couldn't exist, and rooms that overlapped impossibly. And beneath the restaurant was drawn a vast circular chamber, labelled only with a symbol, a curved line intersecting with 3 straight ones. The same symbol was etched into the concrete floor of the hidden room. I noticed a leather-bound journal on a small table in the corner. Opening it revealed handwritten entries from various McDonald's managers dating back decades. I flipped to a random page from 1967. June 8th, another breach in the play place, 3rd this month. The entity is growing more active. Corporate has authorized expansion of containment measures. New manager, training protocols implemented. Another entry from 1973, November 22nd. Midnight visitor consumed J. Reynolds before protocol could be implemented. Remains discovered behind freezer unit. Official cause of death listed as equipment accident. Family compensated as per procedure. And a more recent entry from just last year, April 4th. Entity, attempted manifestation through ice cream machine. Containment successful but significant energy expenditure required. 4-day recovery period estimated. Corporate reminded of need for additional anchor points. I was so absorbed in the documents that I didn't hear the footsteps until it was almost too late. I barely managed to slip back through the hidden door and replace the cleaning supplies before Tom entered the storage room. "Finding everything okay?" he asked, his voice pleasant but his eyes sharp. "Just looking for napkins," I said, holding up the stack I grabbed as cover. He nodded, but I don't think he believed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The journal entries kept running through my mind. What entity were they talking about? What were the anchor points? And what did the ice cream machine have to do with any of it? I called in sick the next day, needing time to process what I'd discovered. I drove to the county library and searched for information about Millfield's history. There wasn't much, just a thin folder of newspaper clippings and a self-published booklet by a local historian. But one article from 1953 caught my attention. Highway route changed after survey anomalies. It described how the original planned route for Highway 33 was altered after multiple survey teams reported equipment failures and unexplained discrepancies in their measurements around a particular grove of oak trees. A photo accompanied the article, the same ancient oaks that the highway now curved around, right where the McDonald's stood. Another clipping from 1954 mentioned the tragic accident during the construction of a roadside refreshment establishment that claimed the lives of 2 workers. No details were provided, but the dates matched the first entry in the maintenance logs I'd found. The historical booklet contained only one relevant passage. The indigenous Shawnee people avoided the area now intersection of Route 33 and Old Mill Road, believing it to be a thin place where spirits could cross between worlds. Early settlers reported unusual phenomena in the area, including livestock disappearances and unexplained sounds emanating from the ancient oak grove. On my way home, I drove past the McDonald's. Something made me pull into the parking lot. From the outside, the restaurant looked normal in the afternoon sunlight, but as I watched, I noticed something odd about the shadows cast by the building. They seemed to move slightly out of sync with the clouds passing overhead, as if responding to a different light source entirely. A tapping on my window startled me. An older woman stood beside my car, gesturing for me to roll down the window. Cautiously, I complied. "Don't go back in there," she said without preamble. "You've started noticing, haven't you? They'll know. They always know." "Who are you?" I asked. "Marion Fisher. I worked there in the 80s, got curious like you." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a strange pattern of scars that ran from her wrist to her elbow, forming what looked like letters in no alphabet I recognized. "This place isn't what you think it is," she said. "It was never just a restaurant. They built it here because they had to contain what was already here." "What are you talking about? Who's they?" "The company knows, has always known. Why do you think they chose this spot, right where the highway bends around those old trees? Did you ever wonder why the road doesn't just go straight?" She gestured towards the ancient oaks visible from the parking lot. Those trees grew in a perfect circle, nothing natural about that. the indigenous people here wouldn't go near them. The settlers tried to cut them down and gave up after 7 men disappeared. She leaned closer. The restaurant sits on a thin spot. Reality doesn't work quite right here. That's why there are rules. A car pulled into the lot, Tom's sedan. Marion straightened up, her expression suddenly casual. Think about what I said, and whatever you do, follow the rules. She walked away quickly, disappearing around the corner of the building. Tom approached my car, smiling that same empty smile. Feeling better? We missed you today. Just a stomach bug, I lied. I'll be in tomorrow. He nodded. Good. We need our full team, especially for the overnight shifts. Something in the way he emphasized full team made my skin crawl. I returned to work the next day, hyper-aware of every strange detail I previously overlooked. The subtle asymmetry of the dining area, the way certain lights flickered in patterns rather than randomly. The specific routes the staff unconsciously took when moving through the restaurant, forming the same symbol I'd seen in the hidden room. That evening, I found another addition to my rule packet in my locker. Rule 9. If you hear knocking from inside the freezer, don't open it no matter who you think is calling your name. Rule 10. If all digital clocks display 8888, lock yourself in the bathroom stall farthest from the door until normal time returns. Rule 11. Never, under any circumstances, enter the restaurant if the golden arches are illuminated in blue instead of yellow. I stared at Rule 11 for a long time. The arches were never blue. I'd never even heard of blue arches at any McDonald's. Why include a rule about something that couldn't happen? Unless it could. The next night, I arrived for my shift to find police cars in the parking lot. An ambulance was just pulling away, lights flashing but no siren. What happened? I asked Jake, who was smoking nervously by the dumpster. Andrew tried to fix the ice cream machine, he said flatly, during daylight hours, which is usually safe, but he opened the wrong panel. Is he okay? Jake took a long drag on his cigarette. Depends on your definition of okay. He's alive, missing 3 fingers and doesn't remember his own name, but alive. I thought back to the journal entries. The entity tried to manifest through the machine. Jake's cigarette fell from his fingers. How do you know about that? He hissed, grabbing my arm. Who told you? Before I could answer, Tom appeared in the back doorway. Everything all right out here? He called. Fine, Jake said, releasing me. Just explaining about Andrew's accident. Tom nodded. Unfortunate, but preventable if procedures had been followed. His gaze lingered on me. Let's get inside. Busy night ahead. The shift was indeed busy. A constant stream of customers, keeping us running until well after midnight. But throughout the rush, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not by Tom or the security cameras, but by something else. Something that observed from just beyond the edges of perception. Around 1 a.m, things finally slowed down. I was restocking the fry station when Michelle approached, her expression tense. There's a customer asking for you specifically, she said quietly. Register 3. I felt a chill. Register 3, the one with the hidden button mentioned in Rule 6. I approached cautiously. A man stood waiting, completely ordinary looking, in jeans and a flannel shirt. But when he saw me, his face split into a grin that was just slightly too wide. There you are, he said. His voice had an echo to it, as if he was speaking from the bottom of a well. I've been waiting for someone who sees. I glanced at the ordering screen that faced him. In the reflection, the man didn't appear human at all, just a shadowy figure with pinpricks of light where eyes should be. My hand found the hidden button under the counter. I pressed it, feeling it click satisfyingly. I need to ask you to proceed to the place area, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. There's a special promotion tonight. The man's grin widened impossibly. Very good, you know the rules, but do you know why they exist? Before I could respond, Tom appeared beside me. "I'll handle this," he said smoothly. "Please assist Darren in the back." I retreated gratefully. Through the pickup window, I watched Tom lead the strange customer towards the play place. They entered together, the door locking behind them. 10 minutes later, Tom emerged alone, looking drained and unsteady on his feet. The play place remained locked for the rest of the night, the lights off, the interior too dark to see inside. When I arrived for my next shift, the play place was open again, full of children playing normally. There was no sign of the strange man. The next few weeks settled into an uneasy routine. I followed the rules meticulously, witnessed more inexplicable events, and gathered scraps of information where I could. I learned to recognize the patterns, which customers weren't quite human, which areas of the restaurant were thin spots, which times of day were most dangerous. Thursday man continued his weekly visits. The woman who arranged her happy meal in a circle added a new element to her ritual, humming a tuneless melody as she worked. The ice cream machine remained broken during my shifts. I sought out Marion again, finding her at a small house on the outskirts of town. She was reluctant to tell me more, but eventually relented. "The company discovered it by accident," she explained, serving me tea in a chipped mug. "The entity beneath the oak grove. They realized it could be contained but not destroyed, and then they realized it could be used." "Used for what?" I asked. "Energy, power. The kind that doesn't come from coal or atoms. The kind that bends reality." She sipped her tea. "Have you ever wondered why this one restaurant in the middle of nowhere never closes? Why corporate protects it despite all the incidents? The food isn't the real product here." "But what is the entity? What does it want?" Marion's eyes grew distant. "It's old, older than humanity. It doesn't think like us, doesn't want like us. It just is. But it's hungry. Always hungry. The rules, the patterns we maintain, they're like a cage made of behavior instead of bars. And the customers who aren't really customers? Some are its aspects, testing the boundaries. Some are, I don't know what to call them, inspectors, auditors, making sure the containment holds." She rubbed absently at the scars on her arm. "And some are just people in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught in its influence." "Why don't you leave town?" I asked. "Get away from it." She laughed bitterly. "You think I haven't tried? The furthest I've made it is Columbus. Then the dreams start. The pulling sensation, the knowledge that something is following. Eventually you always come back. Once you're part of the pattern, you stay in the pattern." Her words haunted me in the following days. Was I already trapped? Was it too late to walk away? My answer came the next week. I called in sick again, packed a bag, and started driving east, telling myself I was just taking a day trip to clear my head. I made it 50 miles before the headaches started. By 100 miles, my nose was bleeding. At 120, the visions began, glimpses of the entity beneath the restaurant reaching for me with appendages that weren't quite tentacles, weren't quite hands. I turned around. As I drove back towards Millfield, the symptoms subsided. By the time I saw the town's welcome sign, I felt normal again, except for the certainty that I was now truly trapped. That night, I reported for my overnight shift as if nothing had happened. If Tom knew about my escape attempt, he didn't mention it, but he handed me a new rule to add to my packet. Rule 12. If you hear your name being called from the kitchen when you're alone on shift, ignore it and perform the closing sequence backward. It was the first rule that included a countermeasure rather than just avoidance. I wondered what that meant. 2 nights later, I found out. It was 3 a.m. and I was alone at the front while Darren and Jake handled a delivery in the back. As I wiped down the counters, I heard my name, a perfect imitation of Tom's voice, coming from the kitchen. I froze, remembering Rule 12. With shaking hands, I began the closing sequence backward, turning off lights in reverse order, unplugging equipment in a specific sequence, tracing the invisible pattern that we followed every night without realizing its significance. As I completed the last step, a wave of cold air washed over me. For just a moment, I thought I saw something in the kitchen, a darkness deeper than the shadows, forming a vaguely humanoid shape before dissipating. Darren and Jake returned minutes later, both looking shaken. "You felt it?" Jake asked. I nodded. It called my name. "It's getting more active," Darren said grimly. "That's the third manifestation attempt this month." "Why? What's changed?" They exchanged looks. "The pattern is weakening," Darren finally said. "We need another anchor." Neither would explain what that meant, but I was beginning to form my own theories. The thin spot beneath the restaurant needed to be contained by a specific geometric pattern, physical, in the form of the restaurant's strange architecture, and behavioral in the form of our rules and routines. But it also needed something else, something Marion had hinted at with her scars, something alive, anchor points. It all came to a head on a stormy Friday night in April. The power had been flickering all evening as a violent thunderstorm pounded the area. Most of the staff had called out, leaving just me, Darren, and a new hire named Peter working the overnight shift. Peter was too casual about the rules. He'd chuckle when we reminded him, roll his eyes when we insisted. "Corporate BS," he'd mutter. "Doesn't mean anything." That night, just before 2:37 a.m, the power went out completely. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. In the confusion, neither Darren nor I remembered the drive-thru speaker. It was Peter who pointed it out. "Isn't that supposed to be off now?" he asked, glancing at his watch. Darren swore, lunging for the control panel, but in the darkness he hit the wrong switch, not turning it off but increasing the volume to maximum. That's when we heard it. The sound from the speaker wasn't static or silence. It was thousands of voices, all speaking at once in languages that human tongues couldn't form. The air in the restaurant grew heavy, vibrating with each syllable. The emergency lights flickered faster, no longer red, but a deep, nauseating purple. I felt something warm trickling from my ears. Blood. Darren was on his knees, hands pressed against his head. Only Peter seemed unaffected, staring at the speaker with something like fascination. "Turn it off," I screamed over the cacophony. "Peter, turn it off." He moved slowly towards the control panel, but instead of switching it off, he leaned in toward the microphone. "Hello?" he said. "Who's there?" The voices stopped abruptly. A single sound replaced them, a low, wet rumble that might have been laughter. Then the power returned, as suddenly as it had gone out. The speaker went silent. The clocks all reset to 88. 88. I remembered Rule 10 and grabbed Darren's arm. "The bathroom," I gasped. "We need to get to the bathroom." We staggered toward the restrooms, but Peter remained by the drive-thru, transfixed by the silent speaker. "Peter," I called, "come on." He turned to me, and I stepped back involuntarily. His eyes were wrong, the pupils expanding and contracting rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "I understand now," he said, his voice layered with others. "It's so simple. The pattern, the purpose. We've been doing it wrong all these years." Darren pulled me into the men's room. We locked ourselves in the furthest stall as Rule 10 demanded. For 15 minutes we huddled there, listening to strange noises from the restaurant beyond. Scraping, thumping, and what sounded like hundreds of feet shuffling across the floor. "What's happening?" I whispered. "Breach," Darren said, his face ghastly in the emergency lighting. "Full manifestation. The storm weakened the boundary, and we broke a primary containment rule." "What about Peter?" "Not Peter anymore." Darren pulled out his phone. "We need to call Tom. He's the primary anchor. Only he can reset the pattern now." But before he could dial, a voice called from outside the bathroom. Peter's voice, but wrong, harmonics layered beneath it. "Friends," it called, come see what I've become. It's wonderful. No more rules, no more patterns, just freedom." Something heavy slammed against the bathroom door. Once. Twice. On the third impact, the door splintered. Footsteps approached our stall. "I know you're in there," Peter's distorted voice sing-songed. "I can smell your fear. Taste it." The stall door began to warp, the metal bending outward as if pushed by enormous pressure. Darren grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "Listen carefully," he hissed. "If we don't make it, find Tom. Tell him about the full breach. He'll know what to do. And whatever happens, stay within the pattern." The stall door continued to warp, metal groaning. Then, suddenly, the pressure stopped. We heard Peter, or whatever was wearing Peter's body, making a strange, frustrated sound. "Clever," it hissed. "The furthest stall, the anchor point. I can't reach you there." Footsteps retreated. We waited, hardly daring to breathe, until we heard the bathroom door closing. "What did it mean, about the anchor point?" I whispered. Darren's face was grim in the emergency lighting. "Each corner of the restaurant has a point where the entity can't reach. Safeguards built into the original construction. This stall, the manager's office, the supply closet in the play place, and the corner of the freezer." "That's why Rule 10 specifies the furthest stall," I realized. "Exactly. But they're temporary refuges, not solutions. We need to reach Tom." Darren tried calling again, but there was no signal. Of course not. The entity was interfering with everything electronic now. "We'll have to make a run for it," Darren said. "My car's parked right outside the side exit. If we can reach it, we can drive to Tom's house." "And just leave Peter here?" Darren's expression hardened. "That's not Peter anymore, and if we don't get help, whatever's wearing him will break free of the restaurant entirely." We waited until the noises outside had moved toward the front of the restaurant, then cautiously unlocked the stall. The bathroom was a wreck. Mirrors shattered, sinks pulled from the wall, strange symbols burned into the tiles. We crept to the door and peered out. The hallway was clear, but the lights were flickering wildly, casting disorienting shadows. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe, filled with a subtle scent like ozone and rotting fruit. "Ready?" Darren whispered. "The side exit is 20 feet down this hall, then left through the break room. Don't stop for anything. Don't look back." I nodded, heart pounding. We slipped into the hallway and moved as quickly and quietly as possible. The building felt wrong around us. The walls seemed to pulse slightly, the floor sloping in ways it shouldn't. We made it to the break room without incident, but the side door was missing. Where it should have been was just wall, unbroken and seamless, as if the door had never existed. "Impossible," Darren breathed. "It's changing the physical structure." We turned back, only to find our return path blocked. The hallway we'd just traversed now extended into darkness, far longer than the actual dimensions of the building could allow. "Main entrance," Darren decided, "through the dining area. It's risky, but we don't have a choice." As we moved through the warping restaurant, I caught glimpses of the changes. The ceiling had risen at least 20 feet, vanishing into shadow. The ordering counters had melted like wax, reforming into shapes that hurt to look at. And the floor? Parts of it had become transparent, revealing glimpses of something vast moving below. We heard Peter before we saw him. He was in the dining area, standing in the center of the formerly mundane restaurant. But the tables and chairs had rearranged themselves around him in a spiral pattern. He was speaking in that layered voice, words in no human language, arms raised toward the ceiling. As we watched from the kitchen doorway, the air above him began to condense, forming a swirling vortex of darkness. Tendrils reached down toward him, caressing his upturned face lovingly. "We can't go that way," I whispered. "Back door," Darren said, "through the freezer. It's longer but safer." We retreated to the kitchen. Everything was in disarray, equipment torn from moorings, food scattered across the floor. The freezer door stood partially open, a thin layer of frost spreading outward from it across the walls and floor. Darren hesitated. "Rule 9, he murmured. "If you hear knocking from inside the freezer..." "We're not opening it," I pointed out. "We're just passing through." He nodded, but his expression remained uneasy. We approached the freezer cautiously. The temperature dropped precipitously as we got closer, our breath forming clouds in the air. Darren pushed the door open wider. Inside, the freezer looked normal metal shelves stocked with boxes of frozen patties and fries. But the far wall, where there should have been just more shelves, had another door, a heavy metal one that I'd never seen before. "The emergency exit," Darren explained. "It's only accessible during certain conditions. Like when reality was breaking down around us." "Great." We stepped into the freezer and I immediately felt a pressure in my ears, like descending too quickly in an airplane. The air felt dense, almost liquid in my lungs. Behind us, the freezer door swung shut on its own, the latch clicking with disturbing finality. "Keep moving," Darren urged, heading for the far door. "Don't touch anything. Don't look at the corners." Of course, telling someone not to look somewhere only guarantees they will. My eyes were drawn to the corners of the freezer, where the walls and ceiling met. There was something wrong with them. They didn't join at right angles. Instead, they curved inward, creating spaces that seemed to recede forever, defying the physical dimensions of the room. And in one corner, partially concealed by frost patterns on the wall, was a symbol. The same curved line intersecting with 3 straight ones I'd seen in the hidden room. "The anchor point," I realized. "You said the corner of the freezer was one of them." Darren nodded tersely. "That's why it's safer here. The entity can't fully manifest in anchor points." We reached the far door. Darren pushed against it, but it didn't budge. "It's frozen shut," he said, shoulder against the metal. "Help me." Together we pushed, the door giving way with a crack as ice shattered around its frame. Beyond was not the outside, as I had expected, but a narrow utility corridor I'd never seen before. "Where does this lead?" I asked, stepping into the corridor. "Maintenance tunnels," Darren said. "They run under the restaurant. We can follow them to an exit point behind the dumpsters." The corridor was dimly lit by sporadic emergency lights. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation that seemed too thick and dark to be water. The walls were concrete, marked with more of those strange symbols at regular intervals. "These tunnels," I said as we hurried along. "They're part of the containment structure, aren't they? Not just utility passages." "Both," Darren admitted. "The entire restaurant is designed as a containment unit. The visible part above is what customers see, but the real work happens below." We came to a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions. Darren hesitated, then pointed left. "This way." "You've been down here before?" "Once, during my orientation. Tom showed me, just in case." "In case something like this happened," I finished. We followed the left passage, which sloped gently downward. The emergency lights grew further apart, leaving longer stretches of darkness between them. And I began to notice something disturbing. The corridor was widening almost imperceptibly with each step, the ceiling gradually rising. "Darren," I said softly, "something's wrong. The dimensions are changing." He stopped, looking around with growing alarm. "This isn't right. We should have reached the exit by now." A distant noise reached us, the same wet, rumbling laugh we'd heard through the drive-thru speaker. It echoed through the passage, seeming to come from all directions at once. "It's herding us," Darren realized, "changing the tunnels to lead us where it wants us to go." "Which is where?" "Down, to the center." We turned back, but the passage behind us had changed. Now sloping steeply upward, the concrete replaced by rough-hewn stone that looked ancient. The symbols on the walls were glowing faintly with a sickly green light. "We need a plan," I said, fighting rising panic. "There has to be a way to restore the pattern, get things back to normal." Darren was silent for a moment, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "There is," he finally said, "but it's not good. Tell me." The entity is contained by 4 anchor points forming a geometric pattern that keeps it dormant. When an anchor point is compromised, like when Peter broke Rule 5, the entity can begin manifesting. The only way to restore containment is to replace the compromised anchor. "Replace? You mean like repair it?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "No, each anchor point isn't just a symbol or a location. It's connected to a person, a living anchor." Understanding dawned horribly. That's why there are always exactly 4 people on the overnight shift, 1 for each anchor point. Yes, Tom is the primary anchor, the most powerful. The rest of us are secondary anchors, reinforcing the pattern. When Peter was compromised, his connection to the anchor point was severed. Someone else needs to take his place. "How?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. Darren pulled a small knife from his pocket. Blood, intent, sacrifice. Before I could respond, the passage ahead of us brightened. A figure appeared, silhouetted against a strange light. Peter, or what had once been Peter. His body had changed, elongated in ways human bodies shouldn't be able to bend. His head tilted at an impossible angle, almost backward on his shoulders. "Found you," he said in that layered voice. "Little anchors, lost in the dark. It wants to meet you properly, to thank you for the freedom." Darren pushed me behind him. "Run," he whispered. "When I move, run back the way we came. No matter how it looks, keep going up. Find Tom. But you, I'll hold it off. I know what to do." He gripped the knife tighter. "Tell Tom about the full breach. He'll understand." Peter's distorted form began advancing toward us. Each movement was wrong, limbs bending at extra joints, feet not quite touching the ground. With a shout, Darren lunged forward, knife raised. I turned and ran, heart pounding, back up the shifting passage. Behind me, I heard Darren's scream cut short, followed by that terrible wet laughter. I ran blindly upward, the passage twisting and changing around me. The walls pulsed like living tissue. The floor became soft and yielding under my feet. Still, I kept climbing, following Darren's last instruction. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I burst through a door and found myself outside, behind the restaurant near the dumpsters. The storm was still raging, rain lashing down in sheets. The McDonald's building looked normal from the outside, except for one detail. The golden arches were glowing blue instead of yellow. Rule 11, never, under any circumstances, enter the restaurant if the golden arches are illuminated in blue instead of yellow. I staggered to my car, fumbling with my keys. I had to find Tom, had to warn him about the full breach, but as I put the key in the ignition, I froze. Looking up through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw Peter standing in front of my car. No, not Peter, the thing wearing his skin. It smiled at me, the expression stretching its face unnaturally. Then it raised one elongated finger and pointed to my right. Tom's car pulled into the lot. The not Peter vanished, there one moment and gone the next. Tom parked and rushed towards the restaurant, seemingly oblivious to the blue arches. I scrambled out of my car. "Tom, stop!" I shouted through the downpour. "The arches are blue, full breach." He turned, spotting me. "I know," he shouted back. "Get in here, I need you." Rule 11 says never enter when the arches are blue. That's for customers and regular staff. I'm the primary anchor and you're... He hesitated. "Just come, now, before it breaks free completely." Against every instinct, I followed Tom towards the restaurant. At the door, he grabbed my arm. "What happened?" he demanded. "Peter broke Rule 5, the drive-thru speaker during the power outage. He's changed. Darren tried to hold him off in the maintenance tunnels, but Tom's face hardened. The containment pattern is critically compromised. We need to reinforce it immediately. He pulled a duffel bag from his car trunk. Take this, follow me. Don't stop, don't stare, don't respond to anything you see or hear inside. Just follow me to the center. We entered the restaurant. The interior had transformed completely. The mundane fast food setting was gone, replaced by a bizarre architecture that defied physics. The ceiling soared into darkness. The walls curved and twisted. The floor was transparent in places, revealing a vast chamber below filled with swirling shadows and distant lights that might have been eyes. In the center of what had been the dining area, the floor had opened into a circular pit. Around its edge, symbols glowed with the same sickly green light I'd seen in the tunnels. Peter stood beside the pit, still in that distorted form, head still cocked at that impossible angle. "Tom," he greeted, voice reverberating with others. "We've been expecting you, and you brought a replacement. How thoughtful." Tom ignored him, moving purposefully toward the edge of the pit. He gestured for me to stay close. "Set up exactly as I do," he instructed quietly, opening the duffel bag to reveal the same strange items I'd glimpsed in the hidden room. Bundles of herbs, cloth bags filled with what looked like salt, and a battered leather-bound book. As Tom began placing the items at specific points around the pit, I mimicked his actions on the opposite side. Peter watched us, making no move to interfere. "It won't work," he said conversationally. "The pattern is broken. The old ways are ending. It's awake now, truly awake, and hungry." From the pit rose a sound, thousands of whispers overlapping, speaking words that human ears weren't meant to hear. The air above it shimmered, reality itself seeming to thin and tear. Tom opened the book, finding a marked page. "Repeat after me," he said to me, "exactly as I say it. Don't stop, no matter what happens." He began to recite words in a language I'd never heard, syllables that burned my throat as I repeated them. With each phrase, the symbols around the pit glowed brighter. The whispers from below grew more frantic, angry. Peter's distorted form began to shake, the human disguise slipping further. His skin rippled, revealing glimpses of something else beneath, something made of shadow and light rather than flesh. "No!" he shrieked, the sound splitting into multiple voices. He lunged toward me, movements blurring with impossible speed. Tom threw himself between us, continuing the chant, even as Peter's elongated fingers wrapped around his throat. I kept reciting, forcing the painful words out, watching in horror as Tom struggled in Peter's grip. The symbols around the pit blazed blindingly bright. The floor beneath us trembled. The whispers rose to a scream that threatened to shatter my eardrums. Then Tom broke free, shoving Peter backward, directly into the pit. There was a moment of perfect silence as Peter fell, his distorted face registering shock and fear. Then the pit erupted with light, a column of energy shooting upward through the ceiling. "The final words," Tom gasped, blood trickling from his eyes and ears. "Say them now." I spoke the last phrase of the chant, each syllable feeling like swallowing broken glass. As the final word left my lips, the energy column collapsed inward. The pit sealed itself with a sound like thunder. The restaurant shuddered violently, then began to revert to normal. The walls straightened, the ceiling lowered, the floor became solid again. Within minutes it looked like an ordinary McDonald's, if one that had been ransacked by vandals. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted beyond words. Tom knelt beside me, his expression grim. "What just happened?" I managed to ask. "We contained it. Barely." Peter's sacrifice restored the pattern temporarily, but the boundary is weaker than before. He looked at me intently. "We need a new anchor. Someone who's seen beyond the veil but not been corrupted. Someone like you." "What does that mean?" What would I have to do? Tom's face softened slightly. You're already doing it. You've been an unofficial anchor since you found the hidden room. Why do you think you couldn't leave town? The entity recognized you as part of the pattern. So I'm trapped here forever, keeping some interdimensional horror locked up in a fast food restaurant? Not forever, just until another takes your place. He gestured to the book, still open on the floor between us. There's a ritual. It will formalize your connection to the anchor point, make you stronger, more aware. And if I refuse? Tom sighed heavily. Then the pattern weakens again, eventually fails completely, and what's beneath wakes fully and spreads beyond this thin spot, beyond Millfield, beyond Ohio, beyond. I thought of Darren's sacrifice, of the entity wearing Peter like a suit, of what I had glimpsed moving in the vast chamber below. What do I need to do? I asked quietly. Tom explained the ritual, simple but permanent. A connection forged in blood and will. As primary anchor, he would guide me through it, help me understand my role in maintaining the pattern. The company will compensate you, of course, he added. They take care of their special employees, your grandfather's medical care, your student loans, whatever you need. The company knows about all this. Tom laughed without humor. Who do you think built the restaurant here in the first place? They found the entity in 1954 during highway construction, realized it could be contained, but not destroyed, and then they realized it could be used. Used for what? Energy. Power. The kind that doesn't come from coal or atoms. The kind that bends reality just enough to ensure everyone craves a Big Mac at exactly the right time, no matter where they are in the world. He gestured around at the restaurant. This location is a prototype. There are others now, built on similar thin spots. The golden arches make a pattern of their own across the whole country. A containment grid. The implications were staggering. I looked around at the mundane setting, the ordering counters, the drink dispensers, the Happy Meal displays, all designed as elaborate camouflage for something far darker. What about Peter and Darren? Peter is gone, consumed. As for Darren, Tom hesitated. He might have survived in a way. Sometimes the entity preserves those it takes, transforms them. They become part of its consciousness, but retain pieces of themselves, like the Thursday Man. A chill ran through me. Thursday Man is a former employee. Tom nodded. From the 90s, he broke Rule 3, stared at the security camera too long, got curious about what was watching through it. I thought about my options, realizing I didn't really have any. I was already part of this, had been since I first read the rules. The only choice now was whether to embrace it knowingly or fight a losing battle against forces I couldn't comprehend. I'll do it, I said finally. I'll become an anchor. The ritual took place that night, in the hidden room beneath Tom's office. It was painful but quick. A few drops of blood, a series of words, and a moment of connection with something vast and alien that now recognized me as part of its prison. When it was done, I felt different. More aware of the restaurant around me, of the subtle energies flowing through its structure. I could sense the other anchor points, feel Tom's stronger presence among them, and far below I could feel the entity, dormant again but still aware, still watching, still waiting for another chance. That was 6 months ago. I still work at the McDonald's off Highway 33 in Millfield, Ohio. I still serve burgers and fries with a smile. I still follow the rules and make sure others do too. The company, as Tom promised, takes excellent care of Grandpa Frank. His medical bills vanished. His health improved dramatically after specialists from a private organization visited him. We have a new hire starting tonight, young, desperate for work, unaware of what this place really is. I've already printed out his copy of the rules, and I've added a new one, Rule 12, If you find a hidden door in the storage room, close it immediately and forget what you saw. Some knowledge changes you forever. Rule 13. If a customer asks about Thursday Man, pretend not to know who they're talking about, even if they insist. Rule 14. Pay attention to the shifting patterns in the floor tiles. If they form a complete circle, report it immediately. He'll think they're just strange corporate policies. They always do it first. But sooner or later, they learn. Here at McDonald's, we all do. Sometimes late at night when the restaurant is empty, I stand in the center of the dining area and feel the entity stirring far below. It recognizes me now, knows I'm one of its jailers. In my dreams, it shows me things, glimpses of its home dimension, promises of knowledge and power, if I just break one small rule. Just once. I never do. I've seen what happens to those who give in. Instead, I maintain the pattern. I enforce the rules. I watch for the subtle signs of the boundary weakening. The blue flicker in the golden arches. The ice cream machine suddenly working at night. The playground equipment moving on its own. And I watch our customers carefully, especially the ones who come exactly at midnight, or the ones whose reflections don't match their appearances, or the ones who ask for the special menu. Most of all, I watch for Thursday Man. He's been coming more frequently now, twice a week instead of once. Sometimes he turns his head slightly as he leaves, and I catch a glimpse of what might be Darren's eyes looking out from whatever Thursday Man has become. In those moments, I remember that I'm not just protecting the world from what's beneath the restaurant. I'm also protecting my colleagues, my friends, from the same fate. That thought keeps me strong when the entity whispers temptations in my dreams. The rules aren't just corporate procedures. They're a lifeline, a defense against forces most people will never know exist. And as long as I'm here, as long as I'm an anchor, I'll make sure they're followed. Because in this McDonald's, in this thin spot between realities, rules aren't just made to be broken. They're the only thing keeping the darkness at bay.